Welcome everybody to the Accessible Web first attempt at a Facebook live streamed podcast. So, hooray! Yeah, let's. I'm gonna turn on Otter.ai for some transcripts here. If you just give me a second. Move this off the screen. All right. Well, welcome everybody, esteemed guests and viewers and listeners. I'm Peter Jewett, and this is my co-host, George Heake. Welcome to the first episode of the Accessible Web podcast. We're figuring things out today, so please bear with us if we have any technical errors, or potentially if there's anything you want to see, definitely let us know. You can shoot us an email. You can hit me up at peter.jewett, Jewett, at accessibleweb.com. Or George's email address is the same format. Yeah, there you go. That's what I need. So yeah, let us know if you are having any trouble watching this, or you want to see more accessibility features. We're doing our best to make this, let's call it the most accessible podcast / live stream on planet Earth. So we want to hear from people that, if there's additional things we can come up with to make this more accessible.
We like raising the bar high.
Yeah. Why not? So I'm Peter. I'm the founder of Accessible Web, sales guy, CEO. So day to day, I'm kind of the tip of the spear, doing the networking, reaching out to new people, handling incoming leads and converting leads into hopefully customers, long-time thrilled customers. We're really growing pretty rapidly this year, so we just closed a round of seed funding a couple months back, and we've grown our team from about, I think, 6 people at the beginning of the year to we're now about 16 people, and we're hoping to be up to about 25 people by the end of the year. So I'll talk a little bit at the end about what roles we're hiring for, but essentially we're in the accessibility space. We're really a mission-driven company, and what we're trying to do is make a more accessible web. So we are anti-overlay. So if you're looking for a cheap $79 solution, I won't name our competitors that we're against. Won't give them the free airtime on the best accessibility podcast in the world. But yeah, we really want to find like-minded clients that want to do this right. Obviously, there's legal and compliance reasons that may be driving a lot of the decision making, but we're really positioned to help you make your website or web application accessible in the correct manner, so that you're not just checking that box, but so that you're really creating barrier-free and pleasant, amazing experiences for customers that might have disabilities. But really, if you're doing web accessibility right, you're making great experiences, better experiences for everyone. So yeah, if you're looking to explore web accessibility and you have a website or web app, get in touch. And we'd love to talk to you. George, what's your deal? Why don't you give your intro?
Hi, everybody. We're very excited about this happening. We've been talking about it for a while, so we decided to jump in the pond feet first. This came about a discussion we had with subject matter, Dan Goldstein, and afterwards it was such a great discussion. We said, this would be a good format for a podcast about what we do, and not just about what we do, but what's happening in the community. I think, and it fits perfectly with Global Disability Accessibility Awareness Day, that a lot of people don't know what resources they have to reach accessibility, whether it's electronic information technology, the web, or physical ADA space. So we purposely wanted to keep this in conversational format. So when we move ahead, we have some great guests lined up. In addition, we hope to have some developers, designers, UX designers having discussions as well to bring to the forefront of what are the current issues. I'm currently the director of accessibility and outreach. And when I accepted the position from Peter and Pete, I really felt strongly about having outreach part of my responsibility. And that would be another word for awareness of what's going on. Because I think at Accessible Web, we go beyond to just compliance. It's not really rocket science of going down the checklist and seeing if your website is compliant to whatever standard you're shooting for in the US, UK, or Canada. But to do it well, it's just not compliance, but it's the user experience. And that's why we've put effort in hiring UX testers that are going to raise the bar and be the exemplar of how you do it. And based on feedback from UX users, testers, people from the community, we're just going to make it that much better. And that's what we hope to do from the podcast. Like Peter said, we're trying to push the envelope on eventually about making this as accessible as possible. But that we need to hear from people that are on the podcast or listen to it, even if you listen to it not live later after it's recorded. Please get in touch with us. If there was something that didn't work on a certain browser, shoot us an email. This is going to be a living, ongoing experience. And the more we hear from the community, the bigger it will be and the more value it will have on the community. So I think it's going to be a really fun experience, and that's what we're going to try to keep the atmosphere going. So we appreciate your patience, and by the way, a shout out to an incredibly talented producer. Abby Scott is behind the scenes, behind the curtain, making everything work. So we have a great team behind making this happen, and we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, so I mean, Accessible Web, I founded it in 2016. So we have an agency here in Burlington, Vermont called Bytes Co., like a computer byte. So we've been building websites since about 2010. So Bytes builds websites, does digital marketing, hosting, and support, and kind of the origin story. All businesses need a good origin story, right? So the origin story of Accessible Web is, at Bytes, we built this amazing website for a high-end lighting manufacturer here, and it was bigger, better than anything we'd ever built. A real showpiece for our Bytes portfolio, and something I just like grinded with two other developers for 3 months and got it out the door super quick. And so we had to launch before Christmas, before the big holiday rush. So anyway, we launched this website, and I went home for Thanksgiving and showed it to my mother-in-law, Annette, and she has some degenerative vision issues, and kind of showing it to her, and she couldn't really like zoom up the text. It was apparent she couldn't see the screen. She was just kind of pretending to use it. So I kind of asked her what's going on, can you not see this? And yeah, she just said, yeah, it doesn't zoom up correctly. The color contrast isn't right. And so, kind of felt bad when, she assured me it was okay, right? But, very polite about it, but went back to the office that next Monday and started digging around into, how to make websites for low vision users. Like, what do I have to do to make that work? And I just stumbled upon web accessibility, and it was a little bit embarrassing because I've been building websites since I was 15 years old. I went to college for it. I'd run a couple businesses. I'd been running an agency at that point for 7 years, and I'd literally never heard of it. Like, it was something that had never crossed my mind. And so had a bit of a moment that was like, oh man, it's embarrassing when you think you're a subject matter expert and there's this whole area that you've never even heard, seen, thought, considered. So discovered web accessibility, and then around the same time, a lot of these lawsuits started happening several months later. And so from a business standpoint, from an entrepreneur standpoint, it just kind of clicked. And I was like, man, I can't be the only web developer out there that is really good at what they're doing, or a designer, or, someone just generally working in the web space. Can't be the only one out there like in this industry, that's not aware of this or doesn't know how to do it. And so from there, we kind of spun up a couple of people at the Bytes Co team to start figuring out web accessibility. Like, what do we have to figure out? Discovered the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, WCAG, and that's a set of standards that if you can build a website that meets WCAG, it should work for most people with disabilities. So there's 4 principles. A website needs to be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. WCAG has 3 levels. Single A is the lowest level. It adds more test and success criteria for AA. That's kind of the mid-tier, and AA is typically what you need to be hitting to meet compliance with different accessibility laws. Mostly around the world. Like, most of them are pointing to WCAG 2.0 AA at this point. And then AAA is a really high bar. So we haven't yet had the opportunity to work with a client that wants to build a true, fully accessible, I'd call it a real showpiece of accessibility, AAA website. But hopefully that's in the cards, and we can find someone that wants to work with us on something like that in 2021. So yeah, we basically spun up Accessible Web, bought a domain name, spun up a website, and spent a couple years just kind of pretending I had a web accessibility company, just learning, and became pretty apparent that I had a lot to learn, right? And had a lot of listening to do. So all of a sudden, big companies were calling Accessible Web, emailing. I'd hop on and pretend, fluff my feathers up and pretend I had a real big company that could service a Dell computer or American Airlines, and from there got to do a lot of free market research, and we really kind of put together the Accessible Web business plan based on those conversations. So AWeb, as it stands now, we really got it kind of rolling in 2019, 2020 last year. Had a few setbacks, like I can imagine most people did with the pandemic, and just trying to be a little bit more conservative than we would have otherwise been. But 2021, we're up and ripping, and we've really, as we've looked at this space, there's a lot of people coming into it because there's money to be made, and every website by legal precedent, the way the ADA has been interpreted by the courts, every website should really be made to be WCAG AA conforming, or else you're at risk of a lawsuit. So, there's a lot of work to be done to upgrading the web. And then, what we want to do is help people really do it right. We don't want to create this veneer of accessibility, but we want to create experiences where websites are really truly accessible and barrier-free experiences. In those early days at Accessible Web, one of the most embarrassing things was we worked with a client, and we thought we had made a website accessible, and got on a phone call, and they were like, well, the screen reader's breaking before it even hits the navigation. The screen reader we're using can't get past the navigation. Did you test with a screen reader? And our answer was no. We hadn't thought of that. We hadn't really done it. And so immediately we kind of adjusted and set some new processes in place, and reached out to members of the community with disabilities that used assistive technology to start putting together a team of people to do testing. So everything we do, there's a saying in the community, nothing for us without us. People that live with disabilities, they don't really want people telling them what they need. They want to be driving the conversation. They want to be kind of part of the conversation, part of the work to be making things accessible, and to be, whether it's laws, whether it's technology, whether it's just, building buildings or whatever it might be. Whenever accessibility is involved, it's really, it wasn't immediately apparent, but it's very clear to us, and it's kind of baked into what we're up to, that we need to be involving people with disabilities in what we're doing. And they're the ones that should really be driving the conversation. They're the ones that should be telling us what they need instead of the other way around. And then the other piece too is, I'll stop my rant here, but the other piece is really that we recognize, and part of why George and I we kind of decided to do this podcast is we recognize we're relative newcomers to this web accessibility space. We can't profess to be the experts that know everything. There's been people in this space for decades, probably as long as there's been the web. There's been people trying to make the web accessible. So one of the big things we're trying to do with this podcast is kind of take a position of reverence, maybe, of being the new guys on the block. And George has done a great job putting together a list of guests that we're going to have over the next few months. And what we really want to do is kind of have conversations about how did we get here? How did web accessibility evolve? What it used to be like, and kind of maybe listen more than we're talking, so that we can kind of get the full scope. And as we learn, that conversation George was referring to with Dan Goldstein, he was a attorney for the National Federation of the Blind, and it was a really eye-opening conversation we had with how we got to this point with ADA lawsuits being what they are. And just by having that conversation, we learned a lot. So George and I kind of sat back after that convo with our internal team and Dan, and we were like, man, we should have more of these conversations with other people in the space, and let them kind of, as we learn, why not let our community, our accessible web community here learn as well, because this is just such invaluable knowledge that they're sharing into kind of the why and the how, that it's definitely worth sharing with all of you out there and in the world that are interested in this.
And to follow up with what Peter just said, we really want to become a trusted source, because I've done many years of community strategic outreach with various disability groups, and you have to be a trusted source. I had a senior tell me one time, I was doing some outreach in Philadelphia, and she told me, said, look, if it's not on the bulletin board in the cafeteria, you can tell me anything, I'm not going to trust you, or from the fire company, et cetera. So the start of this hopefully will create a community that people are comfortable about conveying what have been their challenges. Because over the last year or two, there's been a big push for inclusivity. And I honestly saw a T-shirt last night that said, if you embrace inclusivity and ignore disability, you're doing it wrong. And I think most people don't realize that it's not just the person that might have a disability or a functional need of accessing information. It usually affects their caretaker, their family members. So if you have a group of 10 people with disabilities in a community, we're really talking possibly around 30 people. So and I'm a firm believer, we're all one big community. I don't want to get too sappy that we're all one big family. We know that's not what's happening now, but we firmly believe that we need to have the conversation. If we don't have the conversation, no one's going to learn how to make, these are guidelines. As Pete said, hopefully they'll eventually become part of ADA, become law and have a little bit more impact. But until then, we need to, how do we make the guidelines better? How do we make the practice better? And how do we make this happen? Because Awareness Day, another company, a competitor of ours, did a giant survey, and I think 98% of homepages had at least one WCAG failure. 98.1%. So you can see sometimes you feel like you're fighting the windmill, but the other time, to hear that WCAG might become part of the ADA, to me, is exciting. And I think we hopefully will reach the point that people are doing it because it's the right thing to do. But in the business sector, it really comes down to black and white, or dollars and cents. And the the market share of the disability population is very strong. They have extreme power, purchasing power, and they should be, not only because of that, but they need access to information. And if you think about it, most of the landmark cases for the various laws that are in effect now are individual consumers going to the Department of Justice because they couldn't access the public transit schedule in Atlanta, for example, or couldn't access their schedule at colleges. So in higher ed, with the accessibility of the EPUB standard, which we're working on as well, it needs to involve everybody except outside the technical community. So more people need to be aware of it. And hopefully we can spread the word of what accessibility is. A story that Peter has heard a couple times. I was at the Institute on Disabilities working back at Temple University, and I got to see a presentation of Judith Dixon from the Library of Congress. She ran the coordinated accessible information at the Library of Congress. You can imagine what kind of job that was. But it was the first time I ever saw anybody use a screen reader with an earbud, and underneath her palm, she had a refreshable braille reader that was probably the size of a double thickness checkbook. Underneath her hand, she was reading braille at the same time. And to this day, it's the fastest I've ever seen anybody navigate the internet. I'm like, and when you talk to someone that doesn't know anything about accessibility, they don't realize how many people with disabilities can use a computer productively, either for managing their daily life, going to school, or employment. And that's what we are trying to find solutions for, and that's what we need to hear about.
Yeah, I mean, it's 15 to 20% of the people in the world have some sort of disability, and I guess it's it's not like we're talking about a person that's blind that you might see on the street, walking with a cane. I mean, disabilities is a huge spectrum. It goes from eyeglasses, low vision people is technically a disability, and so I think it's getting people out of that mindset that this is for that group of people, like that disabilities aren't always visible, they're not always obvious. A huge 1 out of 5 people have a disability in some shape or form, and it's also thinking about all of us that don't have one is just temporarily abled is maybe a more healthy way to look at it. If anyone lives long enough, most certainly your vision's going to start to fade. You're going to start to lose your hearing. You could have an accident at any time where you lose, motor control, or an illness that strikes. So this isn't about just thinking about those people. It's kind of thinking about your future self, thinking about your parents, your elders, thinking about your neighbors, the people in your circle, and then, just, I think for me, like, one of the crazy things is just the web. We've made such big progress in the physical world on accessibility, and there's ramps in front of buildings, there's parking spots, there's curb cuts, and it's crazy that we haven't made that same level of progress on the web. Because if you think about somebody that does have a disability that makes it hard to get around, maybe they're blind, or maybe they're in a wheelchair, and think about what shopping is like for them. They have to get a ride from somebody. They're dependent on maybe getting a ride to a store to buy a pair of sneakers. They've got to find the pair of sneakers, try them on, and then get themselves back home, as opposed to just logging onto a computer at home and being able to visit the shoe store, find the pair of sneakers, and get them shipped to their door. So it's just crazy that with the web for me has always represented this world of like infinite possibilities. We're not restrained by anything really, and to think that the web is behind the physical world where there are actual like physical limitations in the world. There's limits to what we can do just because of physics and gravity and materials and construction and space. So it's just wild that the web isn't ahead of the physical world. So I guess maybe we can get to that place where the web is the shining beacon, and the physical world is kind of lagging behind.
Well, and I think what pushed the web, if you look at how we view material, you have the internet, you have cable TV, regular television, that's all becoming one giant fire hose of information. And what I think has driven companies to move so fast in web is that drive for profit. And various groups of people have been left behind, whether you're talking about natural food or fresh food deserts in low income areas, or that's because of profit. Now with social responsibility, the tides are starting to turn, and there's pressure from the community for companies and governments and everything to do the right thing for the community. But they need to hear from the community, and that's what we really hope to do. I think we have a good start at Accessible Web. Another thing to be aware of, I mentioned Temple University. I worked at the Institute on Disabilities, which was the University Center of Excellence for Developmental Disabilities. The only reason I'm mentioning that is that every state and American territory has a USED in it. In Vermont, it's located at University of Vermont. They're usually at universities. And there's also state assistive technology organizations that are responsible for providing services to that state as well as the USED. So there's already networks to help you answer any questions, whether what kind of assistive technology is available for my family member. They're having degenerative eye problems, and they want to get prepared for their job or whatever before this condition worsens. So there's been for years these networks in place all over the country, and a lot of people aren't even aware of them. And that's what we hope to do as part of the outreach piece, in addition for people reaching compliance with what we do and using our tools. But we want to also educate the public and private corporate sectors on where the resources are, because you can't do this alone. But like Peter touched on, now if I take my glasses off, I literally can't see. And if you've ever been to a paint store, if you're trying to read the ingredients on the back of a paint can, I was in Lowe's one time, and someone was trying to read it, and I took out my iPhone, and we took a picture and zoomed it, and they said, "Oh man, what a great idea!" But that's practical, and in various Mac or Windows or Android or whatever, they're starting to kind of agree with a little bit. Apple is really doing a lot of accessibility stuff ahead of Windows, but they're both trying to get on the same playing field of offering functionality that will work in everyday life. So I think we have a pretty good grasp on what's coming down the road.
So Abby's just notified me. We'll take a little break here to give away some Accessible Web swag. We're giving a T-shirt away today to a LinkedIn follower, and a Facebook follower. So the LinkedIn follower is Rebecca Ahern. So Rebecca, if you're watching, drop us a chat, drop us a comment. If you're not, you very well probably aren't. But we will we'll reach out and get in touch and send you a couple of different t-shirt options so we can send you a t-shirt. If anyone out there wants to follow us on LinkedIn, just look us up, Accessible Web, and we're trying to hit 500 followers on LinkedIn, and then we can start dual live streaming this on Facebook and doing a live stream on LinkedIn as well. So look us up on LinkedIn, Accessible Web, and next time we do a podcast, maybe you can be the lucky winner of a Accessible Web t-shirt. Maybe we'll add some hats and sweatshirts and stuff like that as well. So George, let's shift gears a little bit. Like, let's talk about what are we doing here to make this podcast accessible? We've been kind of trying to figure this out for a few weeks. So you wanna give us a snapshot into some of the tools and how we're approaching this?
Yeah. One tool that we're using in addition to captioning on the various platforms is a voice to text recording application called Otter AI. We're recording with that, so we'll have a transcript available after this for people that would need it, or might be easier to access it with a screen reader. We're also using captioning for Google Meet and I believe Facebook as well. So we're hopefully testing to see which levels of captioning is accurate, and hopefully it is. If not, we'll tweak it as we move forward. And
yeah, I mean, for anyone out there, WCAG AA standards, this is something we run into a lot. If you're going to embed a video on your website, you need to have a transcription below it. So in addition to closed captioning that's kind of going along with the video, if someone needs a little bit more time to read, it's best practice to put a transcript below. And you know, like all things accessibility, by having a transcript below your video, it also is great for SEO because Google's going to be able to capture that content and hopefully help rank you. So, you know, the transcript's a great SEO tool, and it gives someone an alternative way to access the content if they, you know, can't hear what we're saying, or if they just want to follow along at their own pace, or even do a Control F and kind of, you know, find certain subject matter in our presentation, in our podcast. We're trying to, might do find a sign language interpreter, do some ASL as part of this. So that's something we've been thinking about. Another best practice is doing audio descriptions of a video. So that's, I guess maybe we should have started this by describing ourselves, George. I'm Peter Jewett. George and I are both wearing gray hats and blue shirts and have very handsome facial hair. Mustache for me and a gray beard.
handsome looking gray beard on myself.
Yeah, we're broadcasting from our attics. I think we're both maybe starting to look a little, at least I am starting to look a little sweaty here. Is the hot day in Vermont, first 90-degree day. So
yeah, it's getting warm here. So
so yeah, we're let us know if you have any suggestions on what we should be adding for different tools. But we're really trying to make something that's accessible for everyone, and we're gonna, after we get off this, and we're posting this on Facebook Live. We're gonna post it on LinkedIn Live as soon as we get up to that audience level, and then following this, we're gonna put these videos for the purpose of posterity on our blog. So we'll embed it right onto our website. We'll probably host it on YouTube or Vimeo. I don't think we're clear yet. Maybe both. And then hopefully people can, watch them as they see fit on their own time. So,
and along with that, everything that we're doing, or a goal of making it accessibility, is what we're making the effort in the spirit of the law. We're making that attempt. So whatever you're thinking, whether it's your family or if you're responsible for a website, oh, I don't know what to do, it's overwhelming, I'm just going to throw my hands up, or you're running around your office with your hair on fire like, oh my God, we got this letter, we have to do something. You have to make the attempt. You have to do something. And that's what we specialize. So whether it's baby steps at the beginning, just by offering a transcript of a video, or suppose an accessible PDF is a little bit of a learning curve. Well, if you have a text version of that document, just put it on your site. That's at least getting towards accessibility. That's in the spirit of the law. That's and people that need these accommodations are very sensitive to that. So looking at it more from a universal design that everybody can benefit from it might be the right way to go.
I mean, as part of the sales process and kind of like signing up clients, we deal with a lot of attorneys because this is oftentimes something that's coming through the compliance of the legal department or part of settling a ADA lawsuit or a Department of Education Civil Rights Office letter. So, everyone, it's like a lot of things, right? People are focused on being perfect and they shy away from advertising anything about accessibility until they know they're 100% perfect and they're, everything's going to be okay. They don't want to talk about it until then. And, I guess we can certainly, we want to help people make it as good as possible, but it's important to look at accessibility as an ongoing journey. Like this isn't something where you're going to just be able to flip a switch or really hire any company out there and be perfect tomorrow. The best thing you can do is to just start, right? It's like that saying, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago and the second best time is today, right? So just start making improvements for accessibility. And listen to your customers, and when they ask for something, some sort of accommodation, or if they make a suggestion to make it a little better, that's how you kind of win at accessibility. It's about chipping away and making meaningful improvements over time. There's never going to be a snapshot, a spot in time where you're perfect. You can always get better. Same way web browsers change, assistive technologies change, the web is always changing. So the big thing is like just making a commitment to getting better at this, to improving. And, that's kind of the way we looked at it with the podcast. We kind of found ourselves maybe like agonizing and hand wringing a little bit, like, oh God, are we going to really get on here? And, what if someone, can't keep up with the captioning? How are we going to deal with that? And so we're really trying to put together the best effort we can, and we want to hear from you. If there's any suggestions, let us know. And we're committed to making it right and trying to get this out to everybody, regardless of whether you might have a disability or whatever assistive technology you might be using. Let me amazing, George. We managed to we're filling up this time pretty easily.
Between the two of us, yeah.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions?
Let me
Abby?
see. Check my producer chat. I haven't seen anything. No. Comment moderation. Well, maybe I should have set the comment moderation on Facebook. But I don't see any questions yet. I'll do the Facebook giveaway. Abby sent that over to me. So from our Facebook page followers, we've got Micah Hagen. Hey Micah. Hey, yeah, I know Micah. He's a fellow Vermonter. So Micah, you won a T-shirt if you're watching, or sweatshirt or something. So we'll shoot you a message or get in touch with us if you happen to be tuned in right now. But congratulations, Micah. This is big time. For anyone out there, if you want to be entered to win some accessible web swag on our next podcast, then follow us on Facebook and you'll be entered to win. So yeah, George, let's talk about GAAD, Global Accessibility Awareness Day. That's today. That's, we decided to launch the podcast, finally pull the trigger and get this thing live, as part of our celebration. I guess I'll say it's been, we've been kind of, like I said earlier, we've been in this space since like 2016-ish. So this is about 5 years in. And it's really cool this year to see so many email newsletters coming around and so many posts on social media from companies that really seem to be getting it, companies that are putting in the effort at this point. In 2016, this wasn't a thing, and I can't tell you, I won't name the chatbot company, but when we first put up our first iteration of our website, we tried every chatbot on the market, I swear, and we only found one of them that was pretty expensive, that was actually accessible, that someone with a screen reader or with keyboard navigation, someone that might be using assistive technology, could actually chat us using this embedded chat on our website. So I was pumped today to see that the chat company that we had been using, and I hounded them. I was like, look, we can help you make this accessible. We'll do it for free if you just do some co-op marketing. But please make your chatbot accessible. And today I got a newsletter from them saying, hey, in the last year we've done a variety of different upgrades, and we're now compatible with screen readers. We're now hitting contrast ratios. So it's today's been several emails that it's awesome, because if you're a business or an organization and you're trying to create a website, a web presence that is accessible, obviously it's going to rely on third-party tools. Like a bank needs an online banking system, a restaurant needs online ordering, right? So usually in the modern web, you're cobbling together a few different pieces to fulfill different parts of whatever functionality you need. And a few years ago, it was so hard. You couldn't really find accessible tools. We had the hardest time getting tools together that could make an accessible website that had all the features of our normal non-accessible website that we had previously at Bytesco. And so anyway, it's really awesome to see everybody kind of announcing, promoting, feeling good about these upgrades that they've made, because I guess this is kind of how we, from a software perspective, this is how we make the web better together. Is if you're the bank and you go and make your website accessible, let your online banking system know, hey, we're WCAG conforming. We have this accessibility statement on our website, and it clearly says that we've done our part, but the only part of our website that's not accessible is our online banking system, because we're waiting on them. Or a restaurant that makes their website accessible and they say, hey, we're not, we're our website's accessible, but we know that our reservation system or our online ordering system needs some work. And, we've also been seeing it from the other side where, before you buy, instead of just calling them out after the fact, shop around, and before you buy, ask your vendors, like ask the chatbot, ask the online store, really thoughtfully try to procure tools online that are accessible, and ask to see their VPAT. That's an accessibility report, a voluntary product accessibility template. So ask to see a third-party vendor's VPAT before you agree to work with them. We've been seeing a ton of deals this year that are coming to us because JP Morgan, right? JP Morgan's a behemoth, and JP Morgan is apparently like just pounding on accessibility. They're requiring it for everything. And so we're seeing all these third parties coming to us because they want to sell to JP Morgan, and they know that JP Morgan's just saying, we're not going to work with you. We're not even going to consider you for this RFP as a response unless you have your system be accessible. And so kind of together, if we all put the pressure on each other, and if we hold each other accountable, that's kind of how it all gets upgraded, and how we can all make the web better together. So anyway, Global Accessibility Awareness Day today has been really cool because, and I guess every year it gets even better because there's more people jumping on board. There's more people realizing this is something they need to be thinking about, a requirement that needs to be filled. And It's not just lip service. It's not just, oh yeah, I think we're in the spirit of accessibility anymore. People are actually figuring out how to do this correctly.
And I think another thing too is we're talking about too what things are wrong and this and that. Also, when you find something that is really not just accessible, really easy to use, or things are visible, like for example with Peter's mother-in-law, if he found something, maybe you were showing a relative or helping him making travel reservations or whatever, and the site was real easy to use. Send a comment or leave a comment. Hey,
Yeah.
thank you for, and that just makes it better. That helps the stakeholders holding the key to all the budgets and everything else. Okay, we're hearing from consumers is important, and also on the flip side, if you see something wrong, say it, and say it in a constructive way. I have a really big interest in physical space and universal design, and my wife, God bless her, can tell if I'm in a restaurant and I go to a restroom, I come back and she can tell by my expression. I say, I have a problem, or I'm really excited about how accessible the restroom is. And if I do it at the beginning of our restaurant visit, she goes, can you wait to talk to the manager until after we order our food? So, whether it's physical space or anything, try to be vocal. If it's not part of your character, talking face to face, leave a comment, follow up with an email, and it just helps making the world a better place.
Yeah, I mean, for better or worse, a lot of the accessibility work that's being done right now is really around compliance, and it's around legal threats. And when we talk to Dan Goldstein, we'll kind of talk about the origin of that, right? And kind of the whole legal landscape surrounding accessibility in the ADA, Section 508, Section 504, AODA in Canada. So there's all sorts of laws, and a lot of people are doing this really, begrudgingly, right? A lot of business owners, they don't like spending money just because they're getting sued and having to upgrade. But, we've always taken the perspective at Accessible Web, like, we don't want to be a FUD company, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Like, we don't want to be lawsuit, lawsuit, lawsuit. Don't get sued, because, the carrot's better than the stick, right? Like, we want to focus on the positive side of it. And, really, like, one of the coolest moments of spinning up Accessible Web was seeing our testers when we first started. Like I said earlier, when we weren't doing UX testing and we weren't actually making sure that someone with a screen reader could use the site, we started doing UX testing with some screen reader users. And one of the coolest things was just seeing them use a site and really, like, just the emotion on their face, like the excitement about being able to use a website, having a barrier-free experience. And that's notable. It's, people using assistive technologies are used to a world where they have to do workarounds, where they have to figure out, maybe I can use this browser, or maybe if I try to access the checkout this way, and I can do some workarounds, or I can figure out how to make this work. But when something just works, when it's a pleasant, awesome experience for them, I mean, it's notable. It's it's not just that it's barrier free, but it's that it's easy. And when you and I, people that maybe don't have a disability, aren't using assistive tech, we think of website errors as like maybe there's a broken image. But we can, a lot of the website errors we're used to aren't game enders, right? Like, we can still make the order, we can still submit the lead, we can still make the reservation, or see the video. But with people with disabilities, a lot of times it's a game changer. It ends their experience. And if we can just all work together and make them have that great experience on a website, it's something that they're going to know, they're going to tell their friends about, they're going to tell their family members about. And there is a real monetary benefit for you to be that business that is doing it for the right reasons and is doing it well. And the other thing too is, like, we hear over and over again from developers that they're having trouble selling it up the chain to their managers, to their owners, that this is important. They know it's important, but how do they get the approval for that extra 10% of budget to really make a well-polished, accessible tool? And, to George, to your point, it's like, that's where making positive comments goes so far, to just say, hey, we appreciate everything you've done. I love the fact that you've now used a chat widget that I can use in my screen reader. By the way, I had this minor problem with this. You might want to think about fixing it. Let me know if you want any feedback, or let me know if you want me to recheck it afterwards. So kind of giving that positive feedback goes a long way, and it's just immensely more powerful than the lawsuits and the doom and gloom and trying to kind of force people to make their websites accessible.
And access to accurate and useful information is just a powerful tool to enable people with, and also has the potential of increasing someone's quality of life, no matter what that is. Making how many telehealth appointments have we been through since COVID?
Right.
How many people don't have access to that technology? So it benefits everybody, and I think we're really excited about it.
Cool. Well, we're coming up on time, so I guess I'll close with a sales pitch. I mean, this is a marketing tool after all for accessible web. So, if you have a website or a web app and you want to kind of have a conversation with us about how to make it accessible, how to start on the journey towards WCAG conformance and improving, get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. And like I said earlier too, we're growing our team pretty significantly this year, and always looking for like-minded people in this space. This isn't just a dev company where we're writing code and building websites or web apps. We're really mission driven. So if you like what you hear, if you want to be part of this, and you've got skills in design, UX testing, what else? We're hiring a marketing coordinator right now. We're looking for a couple devs that are fluent in React, and that can have, even if you don't have a perfect understanding of web accessibility, and this is something that's interesting to you, get in touch. So we're hiring around a bunch of different careers, and hope to make this the next big business in the accessibility space. So you can get in on the ground level. So yeah, check us out, accessibleweb.com. We're pretty active on Facebook, pretty active on LinkedIn, and get in touch. We'd love to hear from you, and I guess stay tuned. We'll be doing these, hoping to get into like a weekly rhythm on these podcasts. So stay tuned, and we'll talk to you soon. We need some sort of outro, George. Maybe for next week.
Just a shout out to Abby, our producer, and our brothers and sisters back at Accessible Web. We couldn't be doing this without them. And we look forward to working with you and talking with you.
All right, later all. Thanks for joining.